Right, so I'm going to start. We're 9:35. I thought we'd give us a couple of extra minutes to. Um, okay, so I'm just getting some messages here. You can hear me. Good. Right. So I'm Daryl Swanson. I'm a director of my own company, Swanson Aviation Consultancy, and I got into aviation a long time ago. Started my career planning and designing airports, and then later moved on to helping people buy airports. I got involved in the electric aviation side a bit early, a bit late. 2002, 2004, I did my MBA, and my major paper was about buying an aircraft carrier, floating it south of London City Airport and turning it into a heliport. And then that's where I really discovered that Londoners do not like helicopters because of the noise. So a few years later, obviously, there's been developments in the space. I've been waiting for Whisper Quiet helicopters and Blue Thunder and Airwolf to come along, but they never really did. But then the Uber Elevated paper came out and started accelerating things, and that's really what re-enthused myself about electric flight. So we've got a really interesting day here in terms of panelists and discussions about electric aviation. I hope you'll bear with us. For Eric and I, this is our first attempt at doing this type of an event. I've been eagerly watching lots of other events happening around the world. So the Agility Prime stuff that's going on. I'm working with NASA and their advanced air mobility stuff. The Vertical Flight Society has been quite active in the space and talking about electric aviation and infrastructure, which is what I'm particularly interested in. Right, so I'm going to kick off first with a bit of a summary of my distributed aviation presentation, which I'm sure you're all well aware of. But I just wanted to summarize it and talk a little bit about everything that's going on in this space. So I'm going to try and share my screen. We'll do that one. And we'll start to show. Right, now I'm hoping that everybody is seeing my presentation. Right, okay, so distributed aviation. So really this is just a brief summary about the economics of hydrocarbon versus electric aviation. We all know that hydrocarbons have a huge amount of energy, and that just makes aircraft engines incredibly complex with high capital maintenance costs. So that means that the operating economics mean that they have to fly at high altitude over long range. And of course, that's really what makes aircraft large. And of course, to pay for all of that, you have to have large airports. So that really is what is driving the hub and spoke type system that we see in aviation today. But electric aviation is completely opposite that. We have battery technology, depending on who you're talking to, that is sufficient for a number of use cases. And of course, we have hybrid options. But the whole hope is that electric motors are generally a lot cheaper to build and maintain and operate. And so that will translate into operational cost reductions. The motors are quite efficient. And in the end, there are more small airfields that are closer to passengers, origins, and destination than there are large airfields with great surface access. So that means that today's regional and GA airports could be tomorrow's sub-regional hubs. And of course, we have future vertiports. This slide really just talks about why I think electric aviation is going to be a very important. And what we're seeing on the left chart there is various different aircraft with their range and typical seat capacity. And we're seeing that these regional aircraft have more and more seat capacity and more range. But the actual airlines are flying them may be peaking at about 200 nautical miles. And of course, this is exactly where eVTOL and eSTOL or eCTOL aircraft can fit right in. And when we looked at the UK, only there's 48 airports, so 1,128 two airport pairs, but only 249 pairs, so only 22% of them were viable for hydrocarbon aviation. Of course, Joby can come in on day one and compete on 24% of those pairs, or 22% of the 8,500 frequency. So this is something that electric aviation can promise, and they won't have to build any infrastructure because the infrastructure is already there for them. The primary infrastructure, of course, we have the supporting infrastructure, electricity, and all of that, but it is relatively straightforward for them to do that. And of course, the BHA aircraft from Faraday will be able to come in and operate on all those routes without any problem whatsoever. But it's not just in the UK. Every market that I looked at, they have the same operating characteristics. So we can quite clearly say that electric aviation is not just for the UK. It is a global proposition. So really what I'm seeing is the emergence of these ELCCs, electric low-cost carriers, initially on the fixed-wing electric aircraft. And then we're going to start to see the shift away from our hub and spoke system of airports to the smaller aircraft or smaller airports. And everybody's a winner in this model, because the smaller airports win because they get much needed traffic. Passengers win in that they're probably closer to their origin and destination than having to travel a large distance to a hub airport. And the hub airports win because you're starting to see a shift to some of that sub-regional traffic that's not necessarily contributing as much to their bottom line as it could. They get that out and they can put long-haul international slots on those routes, which are more valuable, especially to UK PLC in a post-Brexit world. And then, of course, eVTOL, when it becomes certified, will fill the gap and provide that last mile connection. So we really move into our distributed aviation model at that time. But we do have a bit of an infrastructure challenge, and these vertiports need to complement and not compete with public transportation. And this is some slides that I developed with Pascal and Watson for our Waterloo vertiport concepts, which was that first image that you saw. So what we have here is Waterloo Station, the potential site, and of course houses a parliament with a lovely river walk along the area. And additionally, we have the potential for the a river bus type operation. So it's really about finding the right location. So that green shaded area is about what you can walk within 10 minutes from the vertiport site itself. So an able-bodied person, 10-minute average walking distance. But if you start to throw in micro-mobility, so bikes and scooters, and of course, really interesting now that the UK government is passing legislation to allow more of this micro-mobility network to develop, just to try and help us with social distancing during COVID. This is really illustrative of what you can do within a reasonable amount of time. But of course, being located next to Waterloo Station, we have 3 different tube lines, and we've thrown in a river bus with 1 stop. So if you did 2 stops and a 10-minute walk, this is the kind of area that you're able to access. But if you throw in micro-mobility, 2 stops and micro-mobility, all of a sudden your ability to access parts of London is quite significant. And this is really talking about this new transportation leaderboard. So what we have here are the eVTOL, and they're calling it short haul travel. This is from Lufthansa Innovate. And then we have the fixed type aircraft, and I've even managed to squeeze in Faraday in that space. So we have a range operation between, say, 20 and 1,000 kilometers quite happily. And it's about that connection between the fixed electric aircraft and the eVTOL, and the eVTOL serving the last mile back into that urban mobility. And again, this is where we can leverage off of the micro-mobility side to start to deliver passengers where they really want to go without having to resort to a taxi ride. And the idea is to try and use public transport as much as possible for everything else. So distributed aviation, a regional point of view, and the impact of COVID. So I'm seeing this as a potential future scenario. We've got a lot going on in the industry right now. So what I expect is that the regional side is probably going to develop first, because fixed-wing aircraft are a little bit easier to certify. We're going to see those first use cases in cargo and passenger transport. Now, COVID-19, what I'm observing is it's accelerating investment into the industry, and we're seeing these legacy carriers starting to sell off their older aircraft. They're retrenching back to their thicker hub and spoke routes, and they're shedding pilots. And of course, even before COVID, we had the loss of Flybe, but we expect to see a lot more loss of regional carriers. So of course, this means that there's going to be a lot more pilots available in the system. And of course, that's where I expect possibly there might be some opportunities. You'll see pilots coming together as aircraft become available. They might start investing into the space and develop their own electric airline. And of course, we're seeing the activities of Future Flight, NASA, the AAM program, which I'm advising, and Agility Prime, which is really interesting because that seems to be really putting a lot of extra energy into the system. So I expect that we'll start to see those sub-regional routes develop first, and those are on those thinner routes where hydrocarbon carriers appear to fly. And then we'll start to see the establishment of those sub-regional hubs, and then of course eVTOL filling the last mile. So that's my part in terms of where we're going. I'm going to stop sharing. There we go. So our first speaker is Gary Cutts. He's the challenge director from Future Flight, and that's from the UK Research and Innovation Department. And that will be Gary's presentation. I'm just seeing the polling starting to come up. And there are polls. How will COVID-19 impact the development of sustainable aviation fuel sector? Right, so we have the poll there. So you're going to have to forgive me. This is all new to me. Eric, I'm going to ask for Gary to step in and to start his presentation. I'm hoping that you're available, sir. There he is.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can see me now.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. I'm hoping not only can you see me, you can also see my slides. That was a slicker process than I was hoping it might be. So good morning, everyone. I've got around about 15 minutes, and that's all to talk you through Future Flight, which is a UK government programme to try and aid with the acceleration of new classes of aviation. That's quite a challenge in 15 minutes, so let me batter through and try to give an explanation. So firstly, let me talk about the ambition we have as a Future Flight team. That our ambition is quite broad-ranging, and it's very much focused on this total aviation system for the new classes of flight that we have coming in. So what we're looking to do is assure the UK's position in what we call the third revolution of aviation. What we're aiming to do is help to accelerate the adoption of what we call electric and autonomous capabilities. Very much for us, this concept is of this forward-thinking aviation sector. This is not just a technology transformation activity. It's in some ways a societal transformation. It's really great to follow Daryl. I know Daryl has kind of very well developed views on this, and the focus of Daryl's presentation was very much about the use cases, the utility, and the benefits come from these systems. We're very focused on that as well, not the pure technology. But to give the background, Future Flight is a £300 million sterling programme, with 125 million of that being direct government investment in grants. The programme runs to March 2024, and what we're looking to do, as I said, is help to accelerate, develop and integrate aviation systems required for multiple classes of vehicles. So if I go forward and talk about what do I mean by the third revolution in aviation. The one downside of this is there are many things on my screen now with polls and so on. Excellent, thank you. So our third revolution, the first is obviously more than kind of 110, nearly 120 years ago now, getting us airborne in the first case. The bit that I think's more interesting is arguably the second massive revolution in flight, was the advent of gas turbines, high efficiency gas turbines, highly reliable gas turbines, and the aircraft that go with them, which allowed intercontinental traffic and effectively mass transit. Well, that really kicked off in around about 1952. So that kind of generational change of aviation is pretty dated now. It's kind of fantastical to me. That's the best part of 70 years ago. So arguably we're well overdue for a third revolution in flight. And the way that we describe that third revolution is flexing how we fly. Again, very much about the utility of the cases, not about the technology per se. So the picture, inevitably, when we talk about flight, we'll always have a picture of an aircraft. That seems kind of an obvious thing to do. It is undoubtedly one of the key technology areas. I'm not in any sense intending to downplay the aircraft development, but we would contend that the aviation system that comes with that, and I mean the wider total aviation system, requires radical revolutionary change in order to accept these new classes of vehicle. The other thing that we talk about quite a lot is it is in double quick time as well. So if you look at the current aviation system, and particularly think here large transport aircraft, that everything's in the same kind of place. For the large transport aircraft, that is a pretty reliable system, despite the bad press our industry gets occasionally. It is undeniably a very safe, very mature system. Most people do not give a second thought to the concept of safety when they fly. It's completely a given. However, that safe system has evolved over decades. Even in the time that I've been involved in aerospace, some of our safety standards, protocols, and the ways we behave and design aircraft, they continue to evolve to incidents. So it's a very hard fought, very long run battle to get us to an entirely safe aviation system as best we can. If you look at this third revolution of aviation, one of the things that characterizes it is we see a lot of new entrants coming in and working alongside established aerospace players. For those new entrants, the volume of them, their appetite to bring change is just phenomenal. There is no doubt that the industry is looking to a significant acceleration in the underpinning technologies that allow us to get to this third revolution of aviation and flex how we fly. So our real challenge here is we have to develop an entire fully integrated new aviation system to anticipate and allow the acceleration of new classes of vehicle in much, much faster timescales than would generate the system we have today, but without letting go of any of our safety principles. So it's a really significant system-wide challenge. So the mission that we set ourselves, there's many ways of writing this, but we are looking to demonstrate capabilities that improve connectivity. I mean, clearly for us, it's a UK program. We want to do some of that in the UK, but obviously we're looking to provide solutions to congestion, transportation, connectivity of people, and providing services too, across this wider footprint of new classes of vehicle, but without adding to the carbon footprint of the sector. So very early on, we decided that one of the principles of future flight is that the aircraft and the system that goes with it essentially has to be carbon neutral. I talked about electric aviation. It is not the only clean form of propulsion. So we will talk to people about hydrogen and other systems as well, but fundamentally we are looking for something which is carbon neutral and not adding to the aviation system problem. The next area I'd like to cover about the challenge is to talk about the breadth of partners. And it's very interesting. As I said before, I come from a background in large aerospace of many years. Know quite a lot of people in that industry. The instant you step into the wider aviation industry, and particularly this next generation of aviation, you realize the breadth of partners is significantly higher. So the kinds of people that we are looking to work with, and we have been working with so far, and these are just examples, but the architects, engineers, and the operational people at some of the world's most advanced airports. So the systems that allow these new classes of vehicle to come into being, they require physical changes in all that infrastructure, and we will require working with people on that system. Then there's a whole set of things around the communication protocols, the autonomy, control of these vehicles, and production of power, and so on. We look working with what we call the number of diverse airlines, and here airlines may not mean your classic airline. So we have to think about what will be the concept of operating bodies for new classes of vehicle as the future flight regime takes on, and work with all of those operators. We're also looking, and I mentioned this once already, particularly to encourage new entrants, new thinking into aviation. That's not to displace this very mature sector and displace any of the key companies that operate within it, but it's to work alongside them. So we're seeing this real mix of new entrant, new thinking, new technologies coming in alongside a very mature industry. Nextly, we talk a lot about customers, and the next 10 minutes I'll come back and talk use case quite a little bit. This is not just a technology in isolation program, future flight. We're not looking to fly vehicles and develop systems in the laboratory and then look to pilot them at some point later. We are completely focused on doing demonstrations with meaningful, challenging use cases. So we find for some of the events we have, some of the major workshops, we've got a huge appeal to people who are at the opposite end, if you like. They have an aviation system need and they want to work with people to try and develop capabilities, services and protocols that satisfy the need. So that use case is really important. We're also looking at the concept of transport integration. So how do you bring different modes of transport together and make them fully integrated? A significant part of the challenge for us, I think Darryl may have covered this, is the fundamental need for change in the air traffic management systems. So we can give a couple of examples here. One, if you look to something like the urban air or rural air mobility, most people's concept of that is of a large number of vehicles operating near on-demand services. Well, doing that in cities where the airspace is already at max capacity with historic 1960s technology air traffic management systems is a significant challenge. So it's obvious that we'll need transformational change in the air traffic management systems. I believe that autonomy will play a significant part of that, both in the replacement of some pilot functions or total piloting capability, right through to the autonomy in the air traffic management system. So that's a real technological change. And then we think the government has a key role to play in here. I'm proud part of the government programme, but it's not just about this programme, it's about the wider set of government stakeholders. So we work very closely with the UK Civil Aviation Authority and other bodies, and they are really critically important in enabling and allowing the regulation change at pace and controlling the innovation of that regulation to allow us to develop the programme. So it's a very wide range of stakeholders we have in our programme. So if I come to the programme itself, Future Flight was always set up to be a three-phase programme, and it was thus because it is an emerging set of markets, an emerging set of technologies. Our vision of allowing multiple classes of vehicle, from drones to urban air mobility to electrified classic sub-regional aircraft, that sheer breadth will require, I should say, a range of innovations across the entire aviation system. So there's a disparate, wide-ranging set of technologies to emerge, but also it's creating new markets. We're not looking at straight replacement of fully understood markets. So we've always had this principle that the system will develop and that we cannot prescribe the end point. So we set out a phased approach, where phase one was diversifying, understanding the challenge, developing our thinking, and reaching new customers and new entrants. Phase two is around creating focus, bringing together consortia of the various technologies along with use cases to develop capabilities ready to fly. And phase three will be a convergent phase, bringing together those solutions into demonstration. And if I illustrate that with a timeline, this is thus. So our little coloured dots on this indicate individual bodies. Our intent originally was to just bring together people, create community and cohesiveness, and share ideas, which we did on the 4th and 5th of February this year with our phase one competition winners, which involved around about 130 individual organisations in what we think was a very successful workshop with a load of national asset capabilities from the Met Office to the National Physical Laboratory to the Civil Aviation Authority and beyond. So that was very successful. We're now in the next stage of development. So a competition opened on the 11th of May this year. That competition closes on the 1st of July. So by the standards of these kind of programs, that's pretty sporting. Another 6 weeks for people to get their bids in. That competition is for £30 million of government funding for consortia to develop integrated capabilities. There's kind of 2 or 3 strands in here. So there's people can develop capabilities which are bringing aviation system players together with a view to demonstrating flight. So very focused around an aircraft and the use case, bringing together develop safe flight. Or people can bid for underpinning capabilities. So things like the communication systems, software connectivity protocols required to let the entire system work. People can bid for system-wide capability development. The other thing that we've done in the development phase is split it into 2 strands. And a lot of debate about this. And the strands are one, smaller, SME-led, and probably typically shorter programs that kind of a fast track approach where we can bring in people to work quickly, develop capabilities and demonstrate things at pace. The second strand is for more substantial programs, up to 10 million in the largest case of projects of total funds, including government and private investment. They can be led by SMEs, but may typically be led by larger companies, and they're looking to be more like 18-month programs. And we've done that because we think there are two paces of development here. There are really substantial, significant developments required in some of the bigger aviation systems. But if you move towards the drone end of the market and some of the urban air mobility, there's an ability for some of those players to move much faster and bring things to bear. So we deliberately split into two strands to encourage that pace. The last part of the program is a big integrated demonstration phase where we'll intend to bring those systems to fruition and fly the vehicles. The plan itself is bold. What we're looking to do, these are some of the benefits. We are focused on speed of connectivity. Can we do things that will bring life back to the UK's extensive GA community? Darryl touched on this. There are a large number of effectively underutilised aviation assets around the UK. With these new classes of vehicles and systems, we could bring them back to life. We're clearly looking to develop products and services in clean aviation in the UK. And the services is important. The vehicles matter a lot to us, but things like the regulation systems, the air traffic management systems, the underpinning service capabilities, they're also saleable technology innovation areas. We clearly are looking to catalyse investment in the UK, set the UK as being a place that does leads and is friendly to the development of new forms of aviation. And then also things like enable solutions to better serve emergency services. One of the things we're doing now is working with a range of people in the drones community, looking at the use of drones to help directly to assist the COVID-19 response. So they are some of the ambitions that we have. We are very industry-led, but I will say here it's the wider industry. It is not pure technology. So what we're looking to do is focus on the need to commercialise operations of aircraft that are still in development. For us, this is very important. It's not linear. We don't develop the aircraft and then look to use them. We look to develop commercial solutions at this stage. So we're not waiting for them ready, but we're developing that. We're also looking to develop and assist the wider aviation system. So everything that I've said before, from air traffic management, physical construct, Darryl's construct of vertiport, airport atop a building in Waterloo, a really good concept that somebody could bid technology innovation to address that. And we're looking for the wider sector to work closely together and not just pick a handful of small winners. I would say our experience so far from the workshops had in February are feeling very positive. There are hundreds of people in the UK and beyond who have an interest in this. A little snippet for you. We ran some networking events through April to try and build enthusiasm and keep connecting people while we're in lockdown ahead of our phase 2 competition that's currently running. So we think something like 7,000 to 8,000 people joined those networking events to hear me, Darryl, and some of the other speakers today speak. So it's a very active, very broad-ranging community that's aiming to put aviation and the use case front and centre. So to wrap up in the time, what is Future Flight? Well, as I said before, it's a £300 million programme with direct involvement of £125 million of government money. But more than that, it's a convener and integrator of a wider industry with really close access to key partners such as the Civil Aviation Authority. And what we're intending to do is leverage other government investments as well. UK government is heavily invested in artificial intelligence, battery capability and wider digital capabilities and beyond. And we do see this a time when those capabilities are coming to the fore in aviation alongside the classic aerostructures and basic efficiency programs. So we're looking to leverage those programs. We are looking to ensure that the UK is well equipped to benefit from this third generation and what I chose to call the servitisation of transportation. That will come. So the concept of on-demand aviation, aviation as part of an integrated transport and services system, that will come, and we're looking to play into the middle of the development of new capabilities. And lastly for us, we do think that this is a game changer. The integration of the systems, airports, aircraft, airspace, to allow those new classes of vehicle to come to the fore and enter into service quickly and safely. That system-wide integration is really important. And I encourage anyone to come and talk to us. The programme is live. Our next date of closure is the 1st of July, with £30 million available for you to develop capabilities. Thank you very much for your time.
Gary, thank you very much for that.
I guess normally we would be applauding our speakers as they're going through, but since we're all at home or an office somewhere, that doesn't seem to be a bit appropriate. We've had a question come through about the available grants for through future flight. From Roger Solomon, the maximum 50% of total project cost grant available in future flight is a big problem for SMEs when it is said that 70% funding is available for them. Can you just clarify on the funding that's available for SMEs versus larger companies, so say the tier 1 or tier 2 suppliers?
Yeah, I will have to point you back at the applicant brief, because that clearly puts it out in black and white, and they are the rules. The really important thing, and we realised a couple of people have missed this, is that essentially for micro organisations, 70% of costs are covered. Medium is 60%. For large organisations, it's 50%. They are typical ratios, and it's for all kinds of legal reasons, it's not possible to go beyond those. What we have, though, is that the challenge, as I said before, is split into 2 strands. Strand 1, which is more modest, up to £500,000 programmes, they are the only restrictions. So the cap of 50% of total project costs paid by government applies only to the larger projects in here, and that is a cap we have. We have fixed government money, and were we to let that cap go, the net result would be a smaller number of projects being funded. There is absolutely a maximum cap of 30 million. So that is that unfortunately is a restriction we have to live with right now. But I will stress that it is only for the larger projects, for groups of SMEs coming together for the maybe 6 months projects up to kind of £500,000 of funding. There is no restriction on that. It can be up to the 70%.
Right, so up to 70%. Right, so we really should be referring back to the documentation to confirm that. I'm just thinking about a nice little grid format just to get it right in my mind. You mentioned that the total program was about 300 million, and this first phase 30 million. I'm just kind of curious, and I'm sure a lot of people are, whether or not the impact of COVID may see some of those numbers changing, or are they fixed within the government budgets?
No, but the honest answer has to be, if anyone tells you now that anything is fixed as a result of COVID, they're probably deluding themselves. It's undoubtedly a moving feast. What I can share at this range is that across all of these types of programs, not just Future Fly, but also things people will be familiar of, Driving Electric Revolution and Faraday and other related programs, there's a very active, very live conversation going on about COVID-19 impact. What we are socialising for Future Flight, and I would be delighted to get people feedback directly to me on this. We are socialising in Future Flight, frankly, that it is not clear what the impact will be. Others, it's really clear that it's been, beneficial, deleterious, or whatever. We've said we see both things going on. We said we see the appetite for new forms of aviation is probably accelerated by, I'll fill in my view of the survey that was coming up before. I think it's accelerated by COVID-19. There's almost no one you talk to doesn't say this has really made the world think about decarbonisation, new forms of transportation. They need to make fundamental changes in the new normal. So roughly everyone wants to go faster, and Future Flight is a more front and centre programme. When you talk to the participants, of course, some of them are in a significant cash crisis, but not all. And therefore, you're dealing with an industry where everyone thinks that we should now be going faster. About half of them don't know how to fund that faster. The other half do. So we've said this will play out. And frankly, the response we get to this competition, alongside the conversation we have with industry through the next 2 to 3 months, that will shape how the programme goes. I will say there is no direct pressure right now to reduce the government investment in this at all. If anything, it's more, could we rephase it? Could we do more to help? But that will evolve. So yeah, it's definitely a changing story.
Brilliant. Okay. And can you just remind us what's the best way of getting in touch with you and or the program?
Oh gosh, no! I tell you what, we could probably send something out on this. But I'm always happy for people to email me directly. But there's a Future Flight KTN website and email address that we use widely. but anybody can get me at gary.cuts@innovateuk.ukri.org. If I get deluged, I will pass them on to my team as well. But yeah, you can find us. If not, find me on LinkedIn, as many people do.
Right. Okay. Just to let everybody know, Eric is going to be organizing a virtual networking event, possibly in the next week or two. So we'll make sure that everybody who's attending is aware of that. So, Gary, thank you very much. Brilliant as ever, and look forward to chatting you at a later date.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers. Right. So coming up now.